instincts he was born with as he gazed appreciatively at the woman in front of him. Her honey-colored hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she had familiar, large, chocolate-colored eyes. She was wearing a t-shirt with Tilly's scrolled across the front, the shirt clinging to very nice curves. Her jeans were dark and showed off nicely rounded hips. When his eyes traveled back up her curvy length, her brown eyes were on his, and any of the warmth he'd detected was replaced by an unapologetic disdain. "What can I get you?" she asked, now wiping the counter and not making eye contact with him.
"Large coffee to go?"
He ignored the various glass-domed cake stands filled with muffins, donuts, and pies, even though he hadn't eaten in 12 hours. Tilly was known for the best and freshest baked goods for miles. He just wasn't in the mood for eating. She didn't actually give him an answer, only sort of gave a nod. He noticed she glanced over at Dean before grabbing a white paper cup and pouring the coffee. She handed him the drink in a plastic lid. "That'll be $1.50. Cream and sugar over there," she said, pointing to the far side of the counter. He laid the correct change out in front of him.
"How's Tilly?"
"Dead," she said, walking away with a carafe of coffee in her hands. Damn, he hadn't expected that. He'd kinda assumed Tilly would always be here. He glanced over at the waitress again, studying her profile as she refilled Dean's cup. Hell, he knew her, Tilly's granddaughter. She'd always been at the diner with her grandmother, as a little kid and then later as a teenager. Now she'd turned into this gorgeous woman. It was well known that Tilly's daughter had saddled her with her baby and taken off. No one really knew much about her after that. It was sad to hear Tilly was gone. She had always had a warm smile and a kind word for him. So maybe some things did change. He put the lid on his steaming coffee and turned around. No need for cream or sugar. Of course, the entire damn restaurant was still staring at him like a lame cow being judged at the county fair. Pushing open the front door with his palm, he jogged out to his truck, happy to be away from there. Now the last thing separating him from his past was the drive to his father's ranch. He pulled out of his parking spot and drove down Main Street, Wishing River. 8 years, and barely a thing had changed. The old building still had that charm that beckoned tourists and artists, especially during the summer and fall. But this wasn't his home anymore. That much was clear. He made the drive out to the ranch in record time, the need to get this over with encouraging him to drive faster. The winding country roads were virtually empty, and the rugged beauty of the land hit him. As a kid, he'd sworn he'd never leave Montana. Wishing River was nestled between the jagged peaks of the Bitterroot Mountains to the west and the Sapphire Mountains to the east. The valleys held the fall foliage like a secret prize from the other areas of Montana that couldn't boast the range of color they had here. The rolling green hills, the towering trees, the pastures, the wide open sky. They were as familiar to him as breathing. But something wasn't right. Easing his foot off the gas, he slowed as the old 3-rail wood fence bordering his family's sprawling ranch came into view. A couple of the posts were down, some in need of maintenance, but it was fall, and that's when all the maintenance usually happened around the ranch. He pulled into the long gravel drive, dust and pebbles kicking up behind him, and he didn't bother avoiding the potholes, the mud splashing onto his already filthy truck. The pit in his stomach seemed to grow exponentially, knowing his mother wasn't at the door, knowing his father was ill. Once parked, he grabbed his keys and coffee and went to face his past. His boots crunched against the gravel, and he took a deep breath. The red barn in the distance was just screaming for a coat of paint, and he couldn't make out any movement around there, or the bunkhouse way in the distance, but he knew all the Cowboys were out by now. He was the only one not working this time of morning. The large, sprawling, covered porch didn't have a single